So if you're thinking about making a shift, or if there's something in your gut and or your heart that's telling you that it's either time or it's almost time to make a shift or a change to your next area of impact, and you're feeling a little uncomfortable, just know that you're not alone. Making these shifts can be tricky because as human beings, we are creatures of comfort. And even though if we're excited about it, that feeling of uncertainty can make us feel a little uneasy. So if that's you, the good news is that that's 100% normal. And there's also a proven process to follow to help you gain clarity on what's next. And also so you can make progress and feel confident and happy about the decision that you've made. But before we jump into this process and these 4 steps, there was a quote that I read recently by Deepak Chopra, and it had to do with babies and babies' ability to follow their bliss. And so this is really an important piece of the puzzle, because whether you're an executive looking to exit your corporate role, or if you are like my daughter Megan, about to graduate college, or in your early 20s, or you have a daughter that's about to try and figure out what's next for him or her, then the good news is that we can learn a few things from babies before we jump in and learn about the proven process that I want to talk to you about today. The first thing about, when we were all babies, we came into the world, we were kind of a clean slate. We just wanted our basic needs met, and we were open. We did not overthink things. We basically followed our bliss, meaning that whatever made us happy, we would do, without really worrying about consequences or what other people thought, or we wouldn't judge ourselves. And so I think there's really an important lesson to learn from that, because somewhere along the lines, we get influenced, for better or for worse, by our parents and influential people in our lives, maybe teachers, siblings, eventually bosses, and that type of thing. And so sometimes when we're trying to figure out what's next, can be challenging and, like I said, a little tricky to figure out with the utmost certainty what is your next best move. Now, we can, like I said, learn a lot from babies. And so you might be wondering, okay, well, how do we wind back the clock a little bit and figure this out? Well, I'll be chatting a little bit about that later in this video. But first, I want to give you 4 strategies to help you determine what's next. The first one is to get clear on your highest sense of integrity. In other words, what do you feel in your heart is most important to you? How do you carry yourself? Examine your values and what is really, really important to you at your core. Also thinking about who's your who. We hear a lot from Simon Sinek about what is your why, but it's also important to think about who's your who. In other words, who are you fighting for? Who do you want to, make the world a better place for? Who is really in your heart? So who's your who? And then also really discover what your bliss is, similar to babies, thinking about what makes you happy without thinking about it even too much. And in other words, what makes you feel like you're in a flow state, or what makes you feel like when you do it, it just brings you joy. So really write down and journal and think about that. And then finally, before I share this 4th step, a lot of people think that when they're thinking about what's next, they have to have everything, mapped out and planned out. And they have to have a clear plan of everything, which isn't really the case. The 4th step is thinking through what is your next best step of integrity, because a lot of times that forward motion helps the forest become clearer through the trees. So in other words, it might be too big of a task to think about, oh, I'm going to exit my corporate role, become a thought leader, or join some boards. But where do I start? Which board? I don't know. It might be a little bit overwhelming. And so, or it might be just to exit and, dedicate your time to a nonprofit or what have you. But if you think about what is my next best step of integrity, it might be, so I'm going to call someone who's doing what I want to do. I'm going to do 10 minutes of research on the computer to see what's out there. just your next best step of integrity, just to have the train pull out of the station to get the ball rolling. Now, a lot of times, I want to share something that I used to, I go through these questions a lot, and I used to go through them with really a furrow brow. In other words, really getting frustrated because I don't have all the answers. And I learned something recently at a recent mastermind. Some of you might know, I was in Cancun with a bunch of about 8 other female thought leaders led by the amazing Sarah Cannell. And we went on a vision quest walk. And so one thing that I want to share with you, that if you don't have the answers to all these questions, I really suggest that you go on a vision quest walk. This is something similar to the 12-hour walk. There's a book on that. It doesn't need to be 12 hours, doesn't need to be an hour, but I recommend 30 to 60 minutes where you're completely unplugged. In other words, no phone, and just no interruptions. Hopefully out in nature if you can, and just see what comes to you. Bring a pad of paper and a pencil and just notice, if you see any animals, notice the different trees, notice the thoughts that come into your mind, just notice really anything that happens. You're just going through this quest of just being and allowing what is to come to you. Because a lot of times figuring out what's next, it will come to you, and it will come to you easier when we stop trying so hard to figure it out. And so I know that sounds a little counterintuitive, but if you can schedule in this walk, and maybe even schedule it in every week, and just observe and just be. And a lot of times what I recommend is thinking through these questions first, and also putting them out into the universe. And when you go on this unplugged walk for 30 minutes to an hour, if you only have 10 minutes, that's totally fine too. Remember, when we talk about habits, it's more important about being consistent than doing the whole thing. But if you can choose one time to carve out 30 to 60 minutes, then that would be ideal, and see what comes to you. And after you do that, you can circle back and really think through, what is my highest sense of integrity? Who's my who? What brings me bliss, or what makes me happy? And then finally, what is my next best step of integrity? So here's to you being amazing. Here's to you gaining clarity on what's next, where you're being called to, so you can have an even greater impact, or maybe even an impact in an area that you haven't even thought of yet. Here's to you being amazing. I hope you will consider me a resource. I am cheering you on, and I look forward to seeing you next time.